Asbestos is the name for a group of rocks that have amazing, almost magical properties. It's fireproof, rustproof, and acid-proof, and it breaks up into fibers like cotton, so you can spin asbestos rocks into threads and weave the thread into cloth. In the ancient world, asbestos was prized for these qualities and often called rock wool. Nowadays, we know that breathing asbestos fibers leads to major health problems, including cancer. But did people in the ancient world know that asbestos was unhealthy? Let's dig into it on this segment of Ancient Asbestos. Did the ancient Romans know that asbestos was dangerous? The first question we have to ask is, how exactly do we know what the ancient Romans knew about asbestos or any other minerals? Pliny the Elder was an ancient Roman cavalry commander who spent his life working in government, but in his free time, Pliny really liked to read and write books. He wrote about all kinds of subjects, including wine and spirits, and there's even a beer named after him today. Only one of Pliny the Elder's books still exists today, but it's actually the longest book that survived from the ancient Roman era. Pliny's book was known as the Naturalis Historia, or Natural History, and many historians consider it to be the oldest encyclopedia still in existence. It was actually split into 37 smaller books on a variety of topics, and Pliny summarized everything he could learn about the natural world at that time. So the botany book listed every plant known in the ancient world. The zoology book listed every animal, even ones Pliny had never seen but had only read about. The geography book described the known world at the time, and so on and so forth. One volume of Pliny the Elder's Natural History Encyclopedia was on minerals, and it's here that Pliny tells us what he knew about asbestos. Pliny describes a kind of fireproof cloth, which he called vivum, meaning living linen. Well, what's linen? In the ancient world, most cloth was made of linen, a type of thread made from the leaves of tall plants known as flax. Clothes, napkins, and wicks for oil lamps were usually linen. But linen eventually burns or decomposes and disappears. Asbestos cloth, or living linen as Pliny called it, doesn't burn away. Pliny tells us that it comes out of a fire cleaner than when it went in. In fact, Pliny says that asbestos cloth, or vivum, was used in cremation ceremonies. Ancient rulers were often cremated and their ashes were preserved in a tomb or other sacred place. Pliny says that asbestos cloth was used to wrap the deceased ruler so that when the body had burned away, what he called the corpse cloth remained behind, unharmed and filled with the ashes to be preserved. He explains that asbestos cloth is rare and more valuable than pearls. Because asbestos was fibrous and resembled linen, Pliny seemed to believe that asbestos is a plant, not a rock, because he incorrectly says it grows in the hot deserts of India. Pliny the Elder was a Roman writing in Latin, and he explained in his natural history book that the Greeks called the substance asbestinon, which meant unquenchable. That name stuck. Did Pliny the Elder say that asbestos was dangerous? Well, they're confusing some of the things Pliny is saying about minerals other than asbestos. In fairness, Pliny the Elder himself actually seems to have gotten the Greek name wrong. Asbestinon is ancient Greek for quicklime, an industrial mineral made by heating limestone. Greeks used asbestos fibers for the wicks of the everlasting lantern in Athens, and they called it amiantos, which is still the word for asbestos in a number of languages. Claim number 1. Pliny the Elder said asbestos mines smelled terrible. The problem with that claim is that asbestos has no detectable odor or taste. On the other hand, here's what Pliny said about silver mines. The exhalations from silver mines are dangerous to all animals, but especially to dogs. Claim number 2. Pliny the Elder said asbestos mines are poisonous. That also doesn't sound right because breathing or even swallowing asbestos does not produce any immediate symptoms that would make you sick. Asbestos-related illnesses usually only show up at least 20 years, if not 50 years, after you're first exposed to asbestos. But in the same chapter as the silver mines, Pliny brings up the toxicity of mercury, saying there's a mineral found in these veins of silver, which is always liquid and is called quicksilver. It acts as a poison on everything. Claim number 3. Ancient Roman asbestos miners wore masks to protect themselves from the dust. Sometimes the story goes that the people weaving the asbestos fiber into cloth wore the masks. Neither is true. The reason these claims get repeated so much is that the mask idea was first stated in a very large and old book by Scottish doctor Sir Thomas Oliver, who worked in the British mines as a doctor during the Industrial Revolution. Sir Oliver was one of the early voices raising the alarm about asbestos, and his book, published in 1900, is still a kind of encyclopedia of industrial hygiene that gets referenced today. But the story about asbestos miners wearing masks to guard against dust also seems like a case of mistaken mineral identity. In the ancient world, asbestos was generally gathered, not mined in the way it was in the 19th century. Asbestos fibers appear like hairs growing on other rocks. Also, Pliny is clear how rare asbestos was. The same is true in records of asbestos cloth in China and elsewhere in Asia. Asbestos cloth was owned only by the most powerful of emperors, not the product of a large mining industry that was generating enough byproduct dust to make slaves sick. As we said, asbestos diseases take decades to appear. If there had been a long, ongoing asbestos mining industry in ancient Rome, we'd expect to see more evidence of it, especially since asbestos doesn't decompose or disappear. In fact, an ancient Roman asbestos cloth has been found, but only one. On the other hand, Pliny does refer to the mineral vermilion, which he calls minium and cinnabar. Cinnabar, also known as dragon's blood because of its red color, was used in large quantities by ancient Romans, and it was used by large groups of slaves in closed spaces as a pigment. Well, what were they dyeing? They were dyeing linen. Pliny says that the Romans imported tons of vermilion each year, and the people working in the factories and preparing the vermilion protect the face with masks in order to avoid inhaling the dust, which is very harmful. Not only that, when Pliny does mention asbestos, he says it's red. Asbestos actually comes in a variety of colors, but Pliny's description of it as red may explain why that entry got mixed with his description of laborers wearing masks while they process cinnabar. So there you have it. Did Pliny the Elder say that asbestos causes health problems? No. But they did make cloth out of asbestos. And next time on Ancient Asbestos, we'll talk about how the ancient Egyptians used asbestos cloth to make their mummies. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and post any questions about asbestos you have in the comments. Thanks for watching Ancient Asbestos here on Asbestos Rewind.